G'day legends, I hope that you're really well. Now, you will have noticed that I've been AWOL for a couple of weeks on this channel, and that is because I've had a fairly minor, I guess, throat surgery that to cut out something that had burst on my vocal cords, and we didn't really know how my voice was going to go because any time work on vocal cords is very tricky, apparently. But it is sounding pretty good, but I need to take it very light and easy at least for the next 6 weeks until I have another follow-up on this. So I'll keep these short and not too YouTuber-y, excited, over the top, stupid. Anyway, firstly, I really want to thank you guys for the support while I've been away. It's not like you get leave as a YouTuber, so thank you very much. Now, one of the benefits of being away is when you do day-to-day videos, you're sort of on this zoomed-in bit of looking at 24-hour updates, and the war of where you think it's going can swing, not too much in that time. But being away for a few weeks, it's almost given me a view to zoom out a little bit and view what has actually been happening rather than that small snippet. And things definitely aren't going to plan. And for both sides in this, things have not gone to plan. Russia thought that they'd have Ukraine very quickly, and this offensive thought people would be down in Mariupol way in a matter of weeks or a month or whatever. So it is going slowly, especially with Russia yesterday gaining a large chunk of land. We'll talk about that in a second. Now, what has really happened over the last couple of weeks? Now, I took leave after the mutiny. I'm sorry for the ASMR. I feel like I'm doing that, but I just need to take it easy. I can't afford to hurt myself again. Now, Wagner forces have moved into Belarus, and there are training camps a few hundred kilometres to the north of Kyiv. And we do know that there's many thousands of Wagner soldiers there. We do know Wagner soldiers have a lot of experience fighting and do have elements which are very well trained. And they are training Belarusian soldiers by the thousands. And of course, this is posing risks as well to a northern assault, which I don't know if we'll see that. I mean, north to the south. And as well, we have seen the Baltic states and EU countries deploying more forces along near where Lithuania borders Belarus and Poland borders Belarus as well. As we know, there is the way from Belarus through into the Russian enclave of Kaliningrad as well. So I've seen a deployment of more forces there. I'll show you that on the maps now. So of course we have Ukraine in the centre, the capital of Kyiv. We have Belarus, of course, the capital Minsk, and of course we have Lithuania, Poland, and the enclave of Kaliningrad here. So there is a threat that the Baltic states will be cut off from the rest of NATO EU if there was a push through here. But I think any attempt of that and the triggering of Article 5 won't have to happen because it is not a state force. If it was Wagner, it's not a Belarusia force. It's a mercenary PMC. There'd be no way that we wouldn't just be able to wipe them off the map. So that is what I see about that. But a northern assault opening a new front line would pose so many issues. As we already know, Ukraine is having more problems than a lot of people thought would happen on the front line areas already in the east and the south of the country, that if a new front line was to open and more forces had to be drawn off there from Belarus getting involved, that would cause a lot of issues. And we know that Belarus and Russia, and let's just put them as one, have given themselves some sort of security by deploying nuclear weapons in there, essentially making Belarus a nuclear power, at least, although they are controlled by Russia, that the threat of an invasion there opens to a nuclear power again. So that is definitely a threat there. Now, what have we seen over the past few weeks? We have seen, very interestingly, I think the biggest thing which I missed on doing a video, but it was on my Telegram, quick plug if you'd like to join, but was the attack on the Kerch Bridge. Now, we don't exactly know. There's no smoking gun of who actually did this. Was it Ukraine? Was it Russia? And of course, the Kerch Bridge sits here, what connects mainland Russia to then Ukraine and Crimea here. So in here, this is where it was struck. Of course, this is the Black Sea, and we're going to talk more about this, and the Bosphorus through Turkey here, which is where the grain ships go in and out. Now, this attack, many have said, was a false flag for Russia to then have reason to stop the grain initiative and bomb the hell out of Odessa and the grain there as well. And many are saying was to take down that, to stop supplies into Crimea and the south of Ukraine by Ukrainians then hitting that bridge. Now, in this, what I see is the attack killed 2 civilians and orphaned a young girl. Now, should those civilians been there or not, that doesn't really faze me. But what does is the way that this was celebrated. And we see this again and again, the celebration of people, civilians, dying just because of where they were from, or maybe even just like some political bias. I don't think that celebration, especially from idiots on Twitter, YouTube, whatever, sitting back in the comfort of their own home, not doing shit, really being involved and celebrating that. Now, following this, what we saw was the grain deal initiative end instantly, and then followed by a massive series of missile attacks against Odessa, both on grain facilities and hitting civilian buildings, churches, and injuring and killing many civilians. This as well was celebrated by the other side. So I can never get behind any celebration of the death of civilians, whether it be from Russia, Ukraine, America, Australia, anything. It's horrible. Now, the big thing is this did end the grain deal, which we know was absolutely critical for Ukraine's economy and food prices and food availability all around the world. Now, the EU's top diplomat, being Joseph Borrell, has said it means that hundreds of thousands of people around the world will be deprived of basic food. They are using hunger as a weapon. This is one of the worst things that Putin could have done. Now, what we do know is 65% of wheat from Ukraine goes to developing countries and 51% of maize goes to developing countries. Although the numbers of the grain, the maize, whatever, going to developing countries, developed nations, will be skewed by propagandists both ways. Some will say 95% to developing, some will say 95, 97%, I've actually heard, goes to developed. But what we do know is as there's supply versus demand, well, the supply of the West will remain the same. The supply of the developing countries will stay the same, but the difference is the West will be able to pay more for it. So as grain goes up, it will push more people into poverty, and developing nations will not be able to pay the amount that developed nations will, pushing more people into that. And we already do know that there is a cost of living crisis all around the world, including where I'm in Australia. I know it's the same in America, and more people will be pushed into food security all around the world. But we do know that any war, any whatever, pushes those most vulnerable into the worst situations, either by fighting, by food, by poverty, either way. Now, the EU has accused Russia of weaponising food, while Russia has accused the EU and the UN of weaponising sanctions. Now, Ukraine will look to export these grain by land through Poland and Romania and, of course, Moldova, but this has been very sensitive pretty much all year due to the local market and the farmers being undercut by cheaper Ukrainian grain. And, of course, the grain itself is not only cheaper for a lot of reasons. The wages are a lot lower in Ukraine, things like this, so that grain can undercut that. But one of the main ones is Ukraine has exemptions to import and export taxes, which have been a relief to keep the economy flowing, but that greatly undercuts then the farmers here. So in April, Warsaw closed the ability for Ukraine to go via land with a number of other countries. So this as well with other countries around here ends in September. So that's when we could see this open up to then export that grain, which we know has to keep flowing to keep not only Ukraine running, but people fed and not further exacerbate the cost of living crisis that the world is sort of going into at the moment. Like I said, like it or not, war affects those already the most vulnerable. And this is not the first time we've seen food shortage in this area. Now, Stalin killed millions of Ukrainians through starvation. Holodomor in the early 30s, the government forcibly seized land from individual farmers, organised them into collective farms and set quotas that were absolutely unachievable, directly caused by greed and communism, killing millions upon millions. And don't think that we won't see things like this happen again, maybe not in this war, but we will see this throughout we've seen it throughout history, and don't think that we're better than that, because every time I think that humans are better than that, I read or see something being done and I think we're not better than that, and that could happen again. And this is why I'm a big supporter of, you need to learn from your history. Those who don't learn from history are bound to repeat it. And I think we are trying so hard, at least in the West from what I see, to change history that we are bound to repeat those horrible things which have happened and we have done before. Now let's move on to the offensive. The long-awaited spring offensive has now just become the offensive, and it's moving very slowly. And this slow movement has been acknowledged by officials both in Ukraine and in the West as a lot slower than expected, but also saying that it is on track, which doesn't really make sense. But this, for me at least, has been mostly underestimated because of the Russian defensive works. They've underestimated how successful those can be. And I think the biggest issue are actually the minefields and, of course, the air dominance that Russia has. And I say dominance because it's not superiority. They have more power in the air, but they're not completely controlling the entire airspace. Although right on that frontline area, that seems to be more the case. But the minefields are absolutely wreaking havoc as we're seeing vehicles pile up in the same spots after hitting mines from even weeks before. And don't get me wrong, and people won't claim this, but losses have been absolutely catastrophic for both sides in this, with the close quarters trench fighting coming only second to what we see the drones doing and the continuous rolling artillery. Now, the New York Times today has claimed that Ukraine's main push is only beginning now, and I would believe that. I don't think that we've seen the main push yet. I think once we see the challenges and more of that equipment come through, but I would have said that with the Leopards too, so I'm not really sure. But that's what the New York Times is saying, but we don't really know. But what we're going to do is have a look at the maps and have a look at some of the moves that have been made over the last couple of weeks, and we're going to look back as well. So, Kremenar, let's go into this region up here. This is where we've seen a lot of movement only today. So, of course, we have Kremenar here and Svatovi here. So, I would call it the Kremenar way, but we're going to go more up into this region and have a look where we did see Russia make a lot of ground. We're going to talk about why this happened. So, let's have a look from a few days ago. Let's just zoom in more to the west of Svatov here from the 23rd, 24th, 25th, and then yesterday there was a lot of ground made, and then some taken back. And as well, we saw some changes in and around Kremenar, but only very small in here. But there was a lot of ground taken there, to the order of heard between 3 and 8 kilometres. Now, why did that happen? Well, to my reading, it was a rotation of Ukrainian troops, which took more experienced guys with more inexperienced brigades covering a long stretch, which, of course, Russia then capitalised on this, launched an offensive and took a lot of area in there. Now, we're going to look at this same area across a few maps as well. So we're going to look, of course, then across the Rybar Russian sources too. Let's just see how far the deep state is saying this. So let's go from the 25th. So we're saying right on here where this waterway comes through and then jumps out to there. So I know that bit was saying it was taken back, but let's just see what. So it said it was about 8 kilometres. And then if we step through to today, let's have a look. And maybe this is where the difference, so 3. So that's probably where I've heard the 8 and then the 3. And you'll be probably hearing very similar. Now, sadly, I don't have an ISW map from yesterday of this region, but let's have a look. And this is what it's showing here. This is the waterway through here, and you can see this shape step out to this borderline here. That is the same shape we saw step to the borderline there. So ISW is showing similar, although only claimed, of course, in the yellow, not then assessed. But there is a big step through there. So as well, let's have a look at where we're talking Kremenar, where they're saying there was more ground taken. Of course, this map isn't showing that, but it is showing very similar to the ISW, although I think the ISW is showing a little bit more of the Russian gain around here. And then let's have a look at then what this map is saying. So, of course, this is Kremenar, and then we have Torsky and Liman sitting here. So you can line up Liman, where this waterway is, and Kremenar. So I think the deep state is showing fairly similar. The Rybar is showing fairly similar to in the ISW. And let's go up into Makivka and have a look in this region. So this is the same point we're talking of just before. So let's line up where Makivka is in here, Novodani in here, And this is all looking fairly similar, although where we do see is that I think the deep state does show more of a push, because this is the waterway here, same waterway, this is where this reservoir and this reservoir is here, and I think this is showing fairly similar, if not the deep state is showing a little bit more. So let's have a look here, and this one isn't as easy to show, but in the yellow is saying right up to this borderline, right up here, and I don't believe that is showing. So this is on the 26th here. So it is interesting just to have a look over what is going on there. Now, excuse me if I'm taking it a little bit slow. Let's have a look around Seversk. Has there been any real changes? Not really. Now, we're going to go, and I do know that because I do some reading, that there has been more gains in and around Bakhmut. Now, like I spoke about, I've had the ability to step back a couple of weeks. Now, last time I really looked in depth at the maps and talked to you was then on about the 12th. But let's just go from the 16th. Now, even back now, these times, people were saying that, Bakhmut was surrounded, was going to be collapsed. And that is, in my opinion, just not the case. When you see these green, at one point, this was red of Russia out here and Russia out here as well. And people were still saying that Bakhmut wasn't completely surrounded. So, and then we saw Bakhmut, of course, then collapse. So you can't say that this is being surrounded as much as Mr. Davidov would like that, and the celebration of people dying, other humans. Anyway, let's step forward and see where Ukraine has been making a lot of ground, both on the north and the south of this region. So, of course, it was some quieter days. And then we did talk about Klishkivka was sort of back and forward for some amount of time. And then it has pushed, of course, through to the north of Kromove into almost these outside blocks here, but not too much more around Berkivka, although we know that has been back and forward as well. And then from the 23rd to the 24th, we do see a large push from the 24th to the 25th from Ukraine into Avdiivka and Klishkivka here as well, pushing past some of these defensive works that have been built up, as well as some more movement on the north, and then into here, and then stabilising somewhat here as well. We're not sure where this is going to go from here, but we know that the flanks of Bakhmut are moving a lot. But, nothing massive, but are grinding away there. And this region here, rolling hills, grinding artillery, I think we've seen that for a long time, and we will continue seeing that for a long time. Now, I don't believe that I have a Bakhmut map here. Actually, I do. So what we're going to do is compare over a number of weeks. You've got to remember that an offensive is like bankruptcy. Happens slowly, and then it all happens at once. Now, I don't like that all those have popped up for me. So all the waterways have popped up distracting me. That's not brilliant. Okay, let's go this, and then let's look back about 2 weeks at how Bakhmut looked. So this was Bakhmut from my last video, which I believe was the 11th or the 12th. Now, I don't think there's too much difference on the south here. Of course, there is some in and around Klishkivka. There is a difference cut down through here, but as far as some of this, it's not too dramatic, but it's definitely some being captured. But what it does say is Russia has claimed more control in and around Berkivka, around here. Interestingly, the centre of Bakhmut, the city itself, of course, that has been just reduced to rubble, hasn't really changed too much, and not to the north as well. So there hasn't been any massive changes there, taking that it's been a few weeks, but we saw that, Wagner took an amount of months to make slow incremental gains there, and then and at the end did some pushes, like I said, offensive like bankruptcy. Now, let's have a look at what else we have then got. Let's look at Avdiivka and see if there's been any real changes. And I do know from my quick look before this that Russia did make some ground in the north here, around Vesely here. They did take some, but no other major changes. Let's look in Mariinka, and we know Mariinka has been reduced to rubble, and there's so many people fighting there, Chechens, Ukrainians, Russians, everyone, but no real changes. Same in Vuhledar. I can just tell by the shape there's been no huge changes. Now, I know we're going back to front from normal. Let's look here. This is where we first saw really the offensive begin, and so much fighting and promise in here, as we did think in the beginning that Ukraine was going to skirt around some of these big defensive lines down to somewhere like Berdyansk or Mariupol, and then cut off through here. Now, this has been moving slow, as we do know this is still a number of kilometres to the factor of 13 from the main defensive works in this region. But we do know Ukraine has made a lot of gains in Makivka, Peretini in here. But I don't think this is showing too much being over the last few weeks. We do know Ukraine took a lot in the beginning. So let's roll back to where I last spoke to you, being the 12th, I believe. So let's just go forward. We see Ukraine make more gains towards Peretini. Of course, then more stabilising ground. That's why it goes green to blue. And we see some more Ukrainian ground taken on the south here as well in the north, and some more around here, and Russia go back and forward. And that's very common. That there's a lot of villages which are just in grey zone, which in the daytime might be held by Ukraine, in the nighttime might be held by Russia. There's a lot more of that than a lot of people think, and a lot that aren't actually occupied, but people will claim. There was villages in the beginning of this which people were like, yeah, Ukraine has taken this village, which is like, no, that was never occupied. It was just grey zone. It's just the ability to go in there and put a flag up. But not too much has really changed in there, in my opinion, for the last couple of weeks. But this doesn't mean anything. It just means that things are moving slower than a lot would hope, or a lot were then expecting. Of course, this is the map from about 2 and a bit weeks ago till today. Now, what changes are we really seeing? Not too much. We've seen definitely some around here, this Makivka region being taken by Ukraine and held in the blue, but nothing too major on the west or the east in and around here. Fairly similar leading up into the defensive works. We've seen a lot of losses in that region too. Now, we're going to head into is really at the same time that front line, that Novodonetsky Makivka area was being hit. This is where this opened up as well. Of course, from the south of Kyiv, we'll talk about first. So let's roll back to then the 12th, where I spoke to you last. And we do know that this region, this is the most heavily defended by Russia. We do know Russia is building more defensive works as this continues. Now, let's roll up through, and we see ground going back and forward, nothing too major. And then we do see that since the 23rd, we do see that Ukraine did manage to break through some of these initial defensive works in near Robotyne here and push through, making some more ground, but it was stagnant for an amount of time in and around there. So let's have a look at this region on then the ISW and compare it. Sorry, I was a bit mixed up on which map I was meant to be looking at. So of course this is today, being the 26th. And then let's go on to this one, which I believe was either the 11th or the 12th. So a lot of the flanks look very similar, but where you can see is this breakthrough down toward Robotyne here. Robotyne sits in here, taking over some of these first defensive works here as well, pushing in here. So we do see that only claimed Russian control, but it is saying it's under Ukrainian control on the deep state. So we don't really know, but if we take this as if we were to take this as Russia claiming it that it's red, this area hasn't really changed in here, and neither to the east or west as well. So where we're going to go next is into here, the Lobkovy region, where we know there's been a lot of fighting and a lot going on, but not too much change. And from as I do these, I'll get better screenshots as the videos continue, but I don't think much has really changed in that region either. So what we are going to do is we have a few Rybar maps that we're just going to compare from actually a little bit ago. So this is the 6th of July around this Robotyne Lobkovy region, and this is one from the 26th today, and this will give us an idea of how things are moving here. So let's go Robotyne here, and we do see this same push that's being shown on the deep state that Ukraine has pushed to the south and have made this into equivalent grey zone here and are pushing in to Robotyne here. So equivalent to what deep state is showing. Now, of course, the right is today. Now let's have a look here, and this is showing actually less. So this was the 26th, and the Rybar is showing that there's less ground here than there was then back on the 6th. Rybar, Russian sources, ISW, deep state, of course, being Ukrainian sources. Now, the last thing I want to do is just have a quick look at this region here, this Novodonetsky one as well, against then where the Rybar Russian sources. And I forgot to do this whilst we were there. Now, what is it showing? So it's a bit hard to actually get a lot of these to pop up. So we have Staromolsky here, because we put a tinny here, Staromolsky sits here. So put a tinny, Staromolsky, showing very similar. I think sometimes the Rybar does show more ground taken by Ukraine here, but on the Rybar is showing that Novodonetsky isn't claimed, it is under control, but it does show these same push-ins here as well. But this is on today's, and it's not showing too different, although I do think some more ground here is being shown as taken by Ukraine on the Rybar than the ISW. Legends, thank you so much for your support. Being a YouTuber is a pretty piss easy job, to be honest. You sit at home, make videos, talk shit, and act like you're stressed, but it's not like you get sick leave or leave in general. You know, it can be financially draining if you have to have time off. So I do thank you guys so much. If you'd like to continue supporting me, Patreon, PayPal below is the best way, but you guys getting to this point in the video, watching me, I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your support. I don't know how to finish these anymore. Thank you. Bye-bye.